Welcome to the Harris County Flood Control District's virtual community engagement meeting to discuss the Arbor Oaks Stormwater Detention Basin. This virtual community meeting is being offered by the Flood Control District to continue to share vital information with the community during this period when in-person public meetings have been suspended due to safety concerns from the COVID-19 pandemic. My name is Sheldra Brigham, and I'm with the Flood Control District's communications team. I'm joined tonight by a team of Flood Control District leadership and experts, subject matter experts, to ensure that we continue to keep you up to date on these important flood mitigation projects in your community. We are also joined by staff from area elected officials' offices and community associations. We have a message from Precinct 1 Commissioner Rodney Ellis.
Good evening, I'm Commissioner Rodney Ellis. Thank you for participating in this important Flood Control District community meeting about the Arbor Oaks Stormwater Detention Basin. Your input is really important to us because at the end of the day, we are here to support you. Your comments will help inform our plan for this project so that we can address the persistent flooding issues in the Arbor Oaks and greater Inwood neighborhoods in the White Oak Bayou watershed. I want to thank Natural Resources Conservation Service for providing a grant to help fund this project. Stormwater does not discriminate. However, flooding events fall disproportionately on people of color and low-income communities due to a number of factors, such as older neighborhoods that were built before our understanding of the area's floodplains, or built under older drainage requirements, or due to the proximity of the neighborhood to area waterways. Every community deserves to have increased protection from flooding. That's why equity is our guiding principle in assigning our infrastructure investments. We're prioritizing communities that are most vulnerable to flooding and have historically taken the longest to recover. The Flood Control District has been engaging with homeowners in this area since 2003, seeking to participate in the voluntary home buyout program that began in response to Tropical Storm Allison. Thanks to those of you who participated in the voluntary buyout program. The majority of the stormwater detention in this area will be constructed on property acquired as part of that program. So far, the Flood Control District has purchased 207 properties in the Arbor Oaks subdivision. We have more work to do, including purchasing other properties and completing the White Oak Bayou federal project, the nearby Inwood Forest Detention Basin, and several repair projects. We can't do it without your help. That's why it's vital for you to participate in these community meetings. So, again, I want to thank you for attending. We look forward to hearing from you. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Ellis, for those words. We are glad to see all of the community engaged in this project, and we look forward to continuing to share updates and keeping all of you in the community involved. Now, this virtual public meeting will begin with a presentation to share project updates about the proposed Arbor Oaks Stormwater Detention Basin. The presentation will be followed by a virtual question and answer session with Flood Control District team members. Now, folks at home will be able to submit comments and questions through the website, or you can do so by phone. We're going to try to answer all of your questions this evening, but for those of you that were not able to address during the Q&A session, we're going to follow up with you after the close of the public comment period. Now, instructions on how you can participate in this virtual open house are included on this slide. They're on the virtual meeting webpage, and they're on the Flood Control District website. I'll also share a reminder of these instructions when we reach the Q&A portion of tonight's meeting. Now, please also note that a Spanish version of the presentation is available on the public input page for those of you who would prefer to follow along with us in Spanish. We will now transition to Jonathan St. Romain, Department Manager with the Flood Control District. He's going to share information about the Flood Control District and then more about this specific project. Jonathan, over to you.
Thank you, Sheldra, and a special thank you to each of you for joining us here tonight. In this presentation, we will give you a brief overview of this project. But before we get into the project specifics, we want to share some information about the flood control district. The Harris County Flood Control District is a special purpose district, and it was created by the Texas legislature in 1937 in response to devastating floods that hit the Houston area in 1929 and 1935. The Flood Control District was created to serve as a local partner to leverage federal funding for flood damage reduction. Our mission has greatly expanded over 80 years with billions of dollars in infrastructure improvements in the ground. While we are a separate entity from Harris County, the Harris County Commissioners Court serves as our governing body. The mission of the Harris County Flood Control District is to provide flood damage reduction projects that work with appropriate regard for community and natural values. One of the most difficult challenges we face is constructing effective projects that are sensitive to community and natural values in a highly urbanized area. Harris County includes 22 main watersheds, totaling approximately 1,800 square miles and more than 2,500 linear miles of channel. 2,500 miles is approximately the distance from New York to California. Each watershed has its own unique characteristics and needs, and tonight we're in the Oak Bayou watershed of Northwest Harris County. Our area is flood prone, and here are some reasons why. We're prone to extreme rainfall, including tropical storms and hurricanes. We have a flat and slow draining landscape, and we have clay soils that just don't soak up excess rainfall quickly. The Flood Control District works with other agencies and shares jurisdiction over flooding issues in Harris County. This slide illustrates that shared jurisdiction. Inside neighborhoods, as shown on the left side of this illustration, storm sewers and roadside ditches collect stormwater runoff and start the process of moving it away from streets and homes. Storm sewers and roadside ditches are the responsibility of the underlying municipality and Harris County engineering in unincorporated parts of the county. The larger bayous and channels that take the collected stormwater and move it through our drainage system all the way down to Galveston Bay are the responsibility of the Flood Control District. This is shown on the right side of the illustration. In the middle is a stormwater detention basin, sometimes constructed by the Flood Control District. When storm sewers are increased, this creates an increase in runoff. Since it's our policy to avoid impacts to properties downstream, detention basins help to safely take in and temporarily store excess stormwater during heavy rain events. Often we participate with Harris County precincts, utility districts, and others to add recreational amenities such as trails to these basins and along our channels. On August 25th, 2018, Harris County voters approved $2.5 billion in bonds for flood risk reduction projects. This vote followed a series of meetings across Harris County in each watershed, which resulted in a list of what is now 181 bond projects. 160 of those 181 projects have been initiated so far, including 7 projects in the Oak Bayou watershed. A total of more than $1.2 billion in partnership funding has been secured so far to stretch the 2018 bond program even further. The actual timing of each individual project will depend on a variety of factors, including environmental permitting, right-of-way acquisition, and utility relocation, and in some cases, requirements of a particular grant. That said, project lists and projected schedules are updated regularly on our website. While the bond was for $2.5 billion, the full cost of every project in the bond tables is almost $5 billion. So we made it clear from the outset that we would need funding partners to fully construct the projects in the bond program. As I mentioned, we've had some success so far, having secured more than $1.2 billion in partner funds. And this graphic illustrates the many sources of those partnerships, including federal, state, and local funding that the Flood Control District is working to secure for Harris County. Each agency has its own definition of eligible projects and its own requirements for local match funding so that the flood control district works diligently to match projects to the right partnership opportunities. We will now move into the part of the program that is specifically about the White Oak Bayou Watershed and Arbor Oaks Stormwater Detention Basin project. First of all, a little background on the area and the project we're discussing tonight. White Oak Bayou is approximately 26 miles long, flowing from US 290 southeast to its confluence with Buffalo Bayou near downtown. The project area is located a little more than midway down the bayou, where it intersects with Vogel Creek in what is known as the Arbor Oaks subdivision, which was developed in the early 1970s. Following Tropical Storm Allison and beginning in 2003, the Harris County Flood Control District initiated a robust countywide voluntary buyout program to help move eligible homeowners out of harm's way. The program included several homes in the Arbor Oaks neighborhood. Following Hurricane Harvey, the 2018 bond program has allowed us to assess flooding needs and look at property we already own to help reduce the risk of flooding throughout Harris County. The Flood Control District plans to construct a stormwater detention basin in this area that will provide additional stormwater storage capacity in the region. Using funding from multiple sources over several years, within this year alone, 207 owners of flood-prone homes have been assisted in moving to higher and drier ground, and those flood-prone structures have been demolished and cleared so they will never flood again. The remaining property needed to construct this project is currently in the acquisition process. Following voter approval of the 2018 bond, the Flood Control District initiated Bond ID C15, the Arbor Oaks Stormwater Detention Basin. In 2019, Harris County Commissioners Court accepted a grant from the Natural Resources Conservation Service to help fund the design and construction of this detention basin. It's important to note that under the Natural Resources Conservation Service grant guidelines, we must complete construction and other area restoration efforts by October 2024. As part of the Natural Resources Conservation Service, or NRCS grant, $10.8 million has been allocated for the design and construction of the Arbor Oaks Detention Basin. The 2018 bond program has allocated $2.5 million for this project for property acquisition and preliminary engineering efforts. Projects undertaken by the Flood Control District usually follow a predictable set of stages. Overall, we refer to this process as the project life cycle. For this project, essentially, we are right here at preliminary engineering and property acquisition. Over the past year, the Flood Control District has been conducting an engineering feasibility investigation and submitted a technical memorandum to Harris County Commissioners Court. On January 5th, Commissioners Court approved the technical memorandum, meaning we can continue to move forward with this project. And once our preliminary engineering report is accepted, once our preliminary engineering report is accepted by Commissioners Court, we will begin the final design stage before we can move into construction. We will continue to update the public as this project moves forward. There are additional steps required prior to starting construction, but we anticipate breaking ground on this project about this time next year in 2022. There are two primary objectives of this project. Of course, one is flood risk reduction. The other is also floodplain restoration. The Arbor Oaks Stormwater Detention Basin will restore previously developed areas to the floodplain and will provide additional stormwater storage for areas along White Oak Bayou and Vogel Creek. Additionally, the restoration plan restores the area's natural setting, promoting habitat diversity and a reduction in overall maintenance costs. Our agency does not build nor maintain trails, but we often partner with agencies that do in order to make the project sites dual purpose. The Houston Parks Board is looking into possible recreational amenities such as trails for this area that could connect to other area trail networks. The proposed project site is located within the 100 and 500-year floodplain, and along with Harris County's clay soils that do not readily absorb stormwater, the topography of the area creates a bowl-type effect that naturally causes stormwater to collect. By creating a stormwater detention basin within this area of Arbor Oaks, we can leverage the natural topography and increase the stormwater storage capacity to reduce flood risks for the surrounding area. There are two things we can do with stormwater to help reduce the risk of flooding in a given area. We can move stormwater more quickly by channel modifications, or we can store it in stormwater detention basins. A stormwater detention basin is built to store excess stormwater until it can make its way safely back into the channel and then ultimately to Galveston Bay. There are several ways that stormwater will fill the detention basin, but all of our structures are passive designs that utilize gravity to operate. This illustration is showing water overflowing into a basin from a bayou by way of a weir structure. As the water levels in the bayou recede, the stormwater from the basin flows by gravity through the outfall pipe back into the channel. The flood control district typically constructs two types of stormwater detention basins, wet bottom and dry bottom basins. Both wet bottom and dry bottom basins fill up during heavy rain events and then drain as the receiving channel recedes. The difference is that one has a permanent pool of water and one has a dry and grassy bottom. A wet bottom basin, which is what we are recommending for this project, typically has a permanent pool of water and can provide habitat for a variety of wildlife. A dry bottom basin, on the other hand, will fill up during a heavy rain event and then completely drain out once the storm has passed, and it can provide the opportunity for recreational amenities such as sports fields or parks to be built by others. As mentioned, with where we are in the project life cycle with the information we currently have, the Flood Control District is proposing a wet bottom basin design comprised of compartments separated by Vogel Creek in order to maximize stormwater detention volume and help to restore natural habitat to this area. An existing 30-foot easement for two natural gas pipelines, which passes through the area from east to west and crosses Vogel Creek, will remain in place, effectively dividing the basin into 4 compartments. Concrete structures known as weirs will allow water to flow between the compartments as designed. As we move into the next stage of the project life cycle, which is the design stage, we will move forward with appropriate assessments to finalize the design plans. We will meet with the community again during the design stage before we move into construction. The Arbor Oaks Detention Basin is expected to provide approximately 431 acre-feet of stormwater storage. This additional storage would bring a flood damage reduction benefit to 188 structures and help reduce flooded road miles by approximately 3.7 miles. To give you an idea of how much 431 acre-feet of storage is, a standard football field is just about 1 acre in size. Now, think of that football field covered with 1 foot of standing water. That volume of water is 1 acre foot. 1 acre foot is equivalent to 325,851 gallons. Therefore, we expect approximately 140 million gallons of stormwater storage within this proposed Arbor Oaks Detention Basin. The Arbor Oaks Stormwater Detention Basin is yet another structural flood damage reduction project within the White Oak Bayou watershed. There are several other detention basins in the watershed, and we expect to move into construction on the nearby Inwood Forest Detention Basin later this year. Also, channel conveyance improvements are currently ongoing as part of the White Oak Bayou federal project. So let's take a look at the outlook for this project and our next steps. Between now and the end of 2021, we will have finalized the preliminary engineering report, and then we'll have moved on to complete the final design. At this preliminary stage, it is estimated that the project will cost about $17 million to build. During the final design stage, we will continue to work out funding for this project, and we anticipate construction to start in the spring of 2022. We must also complete all construction and habitat restoration activities by October 2024, pursuant to our Natural Resources Conservation Service grant. And now I will turn the conversation back over to Sheldra to kick off the Q&A.
Thank you, Jonathan. Before we move into the Q&A portion, I want to share a quick reminder that we'd love to hear from you on this project and others that are rolling out across Harris County. To learn more about this project, to ask questions, and to sign up for our mailing list, you can visit hcfcd.org/C15. Now, as a reminder, there are 3 ways that you can submit a comment about this project during tonight's session. Submit a comment on this site in the box near the presentation live stream. You can submit a comment on the Flood Control District's website, hcfcd.org/C15, or you can submit a comment via phone, and that number is 855-925-2801. You'll utilize meeting code 4876. And if you are joining us via phone tonight, please press *2 to leave a message. Additionally, I want to reiterate that any questions not addressed during tonight's Q&A session will receive a response from the Flood Control District after the public comment period. And information from this meeting, as well as a recording of the live stream, will be available on the Flood Control District's website, and you can also watch it on our YouTube channel. Joining Jonathan for our Q&A session tonight, our project manager, Thomas Liebert, and subject matter expert, Melissa Meyer. And now it's time to move on to some of your questions. Our first question will be from Jonathan, and it's from Cody. Cody is asking, what will happen to the disc golf that is currently there?
Sure. So eventually, before construction, that equipment will have to be removed or relocated, and we're currently actively engaged with the various groups who operate disc golf courses, and so that coordination process has already begun.
Thank you, Jonathan. There's another question for you from Leslie. Leslie is concerned about the property needed for this project. Have property owners affected been notified already?
Leslie, yes, we've already been in contact with the property owners, or the owners of the property that will be required for the project. So if you have not been contacted yet, then no, your property is not needed for this project.
Thank you, Jonathan. Melissa, this next question is for you. Can funding from the nearby federal project be used to complete the basin if needed?
The White Oak Bayou Federal Project, although it's ultimately going to interface with Arbor Oaks, as you can see on the screen here, it has a completely different funding mechanism. This project we're currently under construction with, it's a joint project, a joint effort between us and the Army Corps of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And the Bipartisan Budget Act of 2018 is providing the remaining funding that's going to complete this project. And it should be finished sometime early next year. And unfortunately, none of those monies can be allocated towards the Arbor Oak project.
Thank you, Melissa. Jonathan, F. Hayes is asking about how the Arbor Oaks project will affect the other subdivisions that the bayou runs near.
So it of course in some of these situations depends on exactly where you are, but typically when we design and construct detention basins, there is the greater flood damage reduction benefit to those areas downstream of the detention basin. And so in this case, neighborhood south and east of the Arbor Oaks area would receive the most benefit from this project.
Thank you. Melissa, question for you. Can you tell me if the Arbor Oaks Basin is part of the Inwood Forest Detention Basin plan? And are they related in any way?
Sure, these are two separate projects. The Inwood Forest Detention Basin, which you can see in this map here, an X is related in that it's in the same general area. They're both flood reduction projects, both interface with Vogel Creek and White Oak Bayou. Inwood Forest is a little bit different in that it's City of Houston land, and we're actually in an interlocal agreement with the City of Houston. And that project is not only going to be used for flood reduction benefits, it's also going to provide mitigation for future City of Houston projects in the area. So they are a little bit different.
Thank you, Melissa. Jonathan, a question about trails. Will trails be added to connect to other area trails, and will those have lights?
So we are working and coordinating with the Houston Parks Board on trails. The Houston Parks Board is working on a plan to connect trails to other areas. Since we're still in the preliminary stages, we can't answer the question about lighting just yet. But like we said, we'll have another meeting with the public during the final design stage and before construction. And so that information will be conveyed to you at that time. I should note that when we plan and design these detention basins, we do plan space for trails up on the berms of our detention basin, but the flood control district does not build those trails. We just plan for the space and then coordinate with some of our partner entities, such as the Houston Parks Board, who then would come in later and provide those amenities.
Thank you, Jonathan. Melissa, Ricky is asking when the excavation work might start in the Inwood Detention Basin. Is that happening this year or the same time as Arbor Oaks?
Excavation for Inwood Forest, we're still working on phase one, which is the design of that project, and we're looking at excavation starting later this year, which will be before Arbor Oaks kicks off.
Thank you, Melissa. Jonathan, you mentioned two types of basins. Is a dry basin, if a dry basin can be a place for recreation, would you ever choose to do a wet bottom? Is there a benefit?
Sure, there are several benefits to the wet bottom basin from an engineering and a design standpoint. Typically, wet bottom basins will actually provide more volume because the bottom of that detention basin is water and it's flat, whereas in a dry bottom basin, in order for it to be maintainable, we have to slope the bottom of that. And so by having that slope on the bottom, we actually lose some detention volume. The other advantage to wet bottom basins are from both an aesthetic and ecological standpoint. The wet bottom basin gives us more opportunity to provide native wetland vegetation and sort of enhance the aesthetic features. And this goes back to our flood control statement at the beginning, where we provide flood damage reduction projects that work with appropriate regard for community and natural values. And so wet bottom basins help with the community and natural values part of that goal.
Thank you, Jonathan. Melissa, Sergio is asking who purchased the Inwood golf course?
Sure. The Inwood Golf Course was purchased back in 2011 by the City of Houston. And then later, Harris County Flood Control District and the City of Houston entered into a interlocal agreement to basically define that project and say that we're going to work with the City of Houston to build and construct that project.
Thank you, Melissa. Jonathan, Jessica is asking when we decided to start this project, and can you also elaborate on the bond program and if that played a part?
Sure, the bond program definitely played a part, and as well as the receipt of our natural resources conservation grant. And so those, the funding is always a big thing, and when we get that availability, that a lot of times can help make projects happen.
All right, thank you. We are continuing to get questions in from you. Jonathan, we have a question about trees. Will trees be cut down? If yes, will they be replaced later?
The answer to that is yes, and probably yes. Yep, so there are some trees in the area that will have to be cut down to make room for our excavation to put the detention basin. But as with most of flood control projects these days, we do try to provide reforestation when and where appropriate. And then the answer is especially yes in this case, because our NRCS grant is sort of geared towards this idea of floodplain restoration, and so reforestation is expected to be part of that process.
Thank you, Jonathan. Leslie D is thanking us for this virtual platform and for community involvement and having the opportunity to make a comment. So Leslie, you are welcome. Go on to our next question. Jonathan, Eileen is asking if this project will affect the existing White Oak Trail.
This project would not permanently move or affect the existing White Oak Trail. Once we get into construction, and we'll know more details later, once we get into construction, there could be some temporary blockages or closures of the White Oak Trail, but that would not be anything permanent. And then, like we said, ultimately, we could see additional trails in this area that would connect into that White Oak Trail. But we're not quite into the details yet of when and where those temporary impacts could be, and we will communicate that with the public as early and as often as we can once we get into the construction stage.
All right, thank you, Jonathan. We're about at the halfway point. For folks who might just be joining in, I thought we could maybe hit a few points about this project before we move on to any additional Q&A.
Sorry, Sheldra, is that me?
Yep. We'll wait to get maybe a first few slides from the beginning portion, detailing a few specifics about this particular project. And then after that, we'll move on to the more questions from folks at home.
Sure. Yeah, and yeah, we can start on slide 12 here. Back to a little bit of the background of the project. White Oak, we're in the White Oak Bayou watershed, and it's approximately 26 miles long, flows from US 290 southeast to its confluence with Buffalo Bayou near downtown. This project area is located a little more than midway down the bayou, where it intersects with Vogel Creek in what is known as the Arbor Oaks subdivision, which was developed in the early 1970s. Following Tropical Storm Allison and beginning in 2003, the Harris County Flood Control District initiated a robust countywide voluntary buyout program to help move eligible homeowners out of harm's way. That program included several homes, many homes in the Arbor Oaks neighborhood. And then following Hurricane Harvey, the 2018 bond program has allowed us to assess flooding needs and look at the property we already own to help reduce the risk of flooding throughout Harris County. The project timeline. See here, we voter approval of the 2018 bond. Following voter approval of the 2018 bond, the Flood Control District initiated what we call Bond ID C-15, the Arbor Oak Stormwater Detention Basin. In 2019, Harris County Commissioners Court accepted the grant that we talked about from Natural Resources Conservation Service, NRCS, and that's helping to fund the design and construction of this project. And it is important to note that under this NRCS grant, under the guidelines, we must complete construction and the other restoration efforts by October of 2024. As part of this NRCS grant, $10.8 million has been allocated for the design and construction of the Arbor Oaks Detention Basin. And our own 2018 bond program has allocated $2.5 million for this project for property acquisition and the preliminary engineering efforts. I think we talked about this a little bit in the Q&A in this project life cycle. Projects undertaken by the Flood Control District usually follow this predictable set of stages that we call the project life cycle. And for this Arbor Oaks Detention Basin project, we are here today where you see outlined in red at the preliminary engineering and property acquisition stage. Over the past year, the Flood Control District has been conducting an engineering feasibility investigation, and we've submitted a technical memorandum to Harris County Commissioners Court. And now, since we are working on our preliminary engineering report, once that preliminary engineering report is accepted by Commissioners Court, we will move into the final design stage and then eventually move into construction. And we anticipate breaking ground on this project about this time next year in 2022.
Okay. Jonathan, residents in the area want to know if this basin will prevent them from flooding again. And how can we answer that question for these concerned residents?
Well, while we can never guarantee that anyone won't flood again, we can say that this project, along with the other nearby projects in the White Oak Bayou watershed, will positively benefit homes by reducing flood risk reduction in the watershed.
All righty, thank you, Jonathan. We have a question from Nalani. Nalani has let us know that the presentation was excellent and self-explanatory in many ways, but how will this system affect flooding in my area? So giving a specific area at Antoine and I guess Armcliffe at the intersection south of Eisenhower High School. Does the Stormwater Detention Basin tend to help Vogel Creek flooding more than west of Antoine? You guys got all that?
Yeah, I got all that. And Nalani, we may have to get back to you on the specific question. And so right offhand, I can't look at our maps and sort of compare the exact benefits that area will receive. But any specific questions like that, you can submit through our online system. And I think we've got instructions here in the presentation on how to do that. And we can definitely get back to you to address that specific question.
Yeah, and I'd just like to jump in as well and mention that the Inwood Forest Detention Basin is on the west side of Antoine Drive as well as the east. So it's going to provide benefits a little more specific to your area in question, as well as the federal White Oak Bayou project that we're working on right now. But for any further specific questions, yeah, that project is now shown up on the screen. You can submit your question. We can get back to you with further details.
Jonathan, can you tell residents the next steps and when they might see construction start?
Sure. Our next steps are to move into our final design phase very soon, and we expect to begin construction right around this time next year in 2022, about a year from now.
Thank you, Jonathan. I do want to remind folks that we do have a Spanish version of this presentation. It's on the public input webpage if you'd like to follow on or follow along that way, or go back and use that as a reference point. And we'll also have this presentation and other materials on our website as well as our YouTube page, so that you can go back and use that as a reference point as well. See if we've gotten any more questions in. We are receiving several questions about the property acquisition part of this project. We do want to let folks know that we've personally reached out to all affected property owners. We're working on an individual basis with each of these property owners, talking to them about next steps. See if we've got some more questions from you coming in. Melissa, did we ask the question about this project, let's see, being built to mitigate the nearby White Oak federal project, channel widening in the area? I don't think we mentioned that one.
No, I don't think we covered that one. The White Oak Bayou federal project does have several detention basins along the bayou that mitigates the channel improvements that we're doing. If you look at the map on the screen, kind of all the green are basins that we've already completed. We've completed all of the mitigation for this project. The last basin we completed was E500-01, which is at Fairbanks, North Houston, on the northern side of the bayou. Arbor Oaks is not associated with mitigation of this federal project.
Thank you, Melissa. Jonathan, getting a question about the basin design. Is the design you showed tonight final? Talk to us more about that.
The design is not quite yet final. You can see up here on the screen this concept, and this is the concept that we are taking into the final design stage, and that's the stage in which our engineers work on to complete our big set of construction plans, and so that's when the design will become final, is once those construction plans are completed. So no, it's not final just yet.
Jonathan, Mary is asking if the detention could cause flooding to happen in areas that don't normally flood.
So no, the detention basin would not cause flooding to happen in areas that don't normally flood. And for each and all of our flood control projects, we do impact analyses to ensure that there is no what we call adverse impact or no negative results anywhere upstream or downstream, or anywhere that would take place due to our projects. And so, of course, our aim is always to provide flood damage reduction projects that work. But then also involved in that is making sure that there are no negative impacts anywhere else.
Thank you, Jonathan. Just a quick reminder to those at home, there are 3 ways that you can submit a comment about this project during tonight's session. You can submit a comment on this site in the box near the presentation live stream. You can submit a comment on the Flood Control District's website at hcfcd.org/C15, or you can submit a comment via phone, and that number is 855-925-2801. You'll want to utilize the meeting code 4876, And again, if you are joining us by phone tonight, please press *2 to leave a message. So several different ways that you can reach out to us. I do want to reiterate that any questions that we're not able to get to tonight during this Q&A session will receive a response from the Flood Control District after the public comment period. And again, information from this meeting, as well as a recording of the live stream, are going to be available on our website, and they'll also be available on our YouTube channel as well. So we'll get back to your questions. Jonathan, Ricky is asking how much water in terms of feet will remain in the basin?
So, Ricky, I think you can be asking that question maybe in terms of a couple of different things, and so I'll discuss maybe both aspects of it. I'll start if you're thinking in the wet bottom basin, how deep is the permanent pool of that wet bottom? It goes up to 6 feet deep, and that's for a few reasons. For water quality reasons, we like to have a depth of about 6 feet, and that's also for wildlife reasons and fish habitat as well. And so that's the depth of our permanent pool of the wet bottom. If you are asking about sort of how deep the basin is itself, or what's the sort of the vertical spacing and detention area, that is about 15 feet, and so that's the space that fills with water during the heavy rain event, and that provides all that space provides the detention storage before it drains back out into the channel. And then I failed to mention the other, when we're talking about the wet bottom portion and the permanent pool, another important aspect of it being 6 feet deep is it provides habitat to the things like the fish that can eat mosquitoes, and so that helps keep the mosquitoes away by providing sufficient depth. If we had a wet pool that was too shallow, then we would just have one big mosquito pit, and so that's how we try to avoid that.
Thank you, Jonathan. Can you talk about how the area near the basin might change for residents that live nearby but not in the footprint of the basin?
Well, sure. Well, ultimately, residents could have a nearby large area that will have been restored to what was previously existing floodplain, and then also has these aesthetic features. And we talked a little bit earlier about working with our partners such as Houston Parks Board to potentially provide some of these connecting trails. And so we think that it could change for the better to provide this nice feature to your area.
Thank you, Jonathan. I do want to thank everyone for all the really good questions that are coming in, but just want to remind you that we're unable to answer really specific questions, but we will follow up on all of the questions submitted. Also, anyone who's messaging in or calling in with questions about property acquisition, want to let you know we will reach out to you after the meeting to address those specific questions, but we've got a number and someone that you can call. It's Don Ward, Harris County Real Property Division Acquisition Agent. I'm going to give you his number twice so you'll have time to get a pen, but it's 239-272-2636. So Don Ward, Harris County Real Property Division Acquisition Agent, 239-272-2636 is his number if you want to reach out with any follow-up questions about property acquisition. Jonathan, Mary is asking if there is a risk of a stormwater detention basin overflowing. How does this work to help reduce the risk if it overflows?
So the Stormwater Detention Basin receives its inflow from White Oak Bayou, and so at that point, the detention basin would not get higher than White Oak Bayou already would be. And its aim, along with the Inwood Reforestation Basin and the other area projects, are to lower that ultimate water surface elevation on White Oak Bayou so that it does not happen. And I might also mention or add to that that we've been talking about reducing water surface elevations and the effects in the surrounding area, and this project will help reduce the flood risk of area roads and help for mobility in the area. And so that's an important factor for residents who live nearby to know, or, if you're not exactly right on White Oak Bayou, you would receive the benefit by increased mobility because of reduced flooding on those area roadways.
Thank you, Jonathan. Leslie is asking if being so close to a basin will affect their placement in the FEMA mapped floodplain.
Leslie, we can't say that. We can't say that for certain. It just definitely depends on your specific area.
Thanks, Jonathan. Going through, checking to see if we have any more questions coming in. We've had a lot of participation from folks. Again, you can submit a comment in the box near the presentation live stream. You can go on our website and submit a comment. You can also give us a call, leave us a voicemail. That number 855-925-2801. Utilize the meeting code 4876. And again, all you have to do to leave a message is to press *2. See if we have any more questions. We've got a little more than 5 minutes left, so still plenty of time for folks. Oh, go ahead, Jonathan.
Sorry, Sheldra. I'll jump in and give a little more on that last question about the FEMA map floodplain and proximity to the basin, because I think where she might have been going with it is, because of the placement there, would the FEMA maps change? And that sort of goes back to one of the other questions about, well, would this detention basin make things worse, or make areas that used to not flood more? And so that answer is no. And that goes back to the point about all of our projects and designs. We have to prove that they will not negatively impact any other folks. And so because of proximity to this detention basin, you would not be put into the FEMA mapped floodplain or anything like that, because we cannot negatively impact anyone else because of this.
Thank you, Jonathan. Can you guys talk a little bit more about where the funding is coming from for this project? Melissa or Jonathan, or both?
Sure. The funding is coming from a couple of different sources, and one of those is our 2018 bond program, and the other is a grant that we have been awarded from the Natural Resources Conservation Service.
Some of that from partnership funding. Can you talk more about that, Jonathan?
Yeah, so a large portion of our 2018 bond program does look at opportunities to receive partnership funding, and this is one of those projects where we're proud to say that we're successful in this endeavor to receive partnership funding from the NRCS. And so you see here on the screen, the breakdown so far is $2.5 million from our 2018 bond program, and that $10.8 million from the NRCS grant.
Good deal. Thank you, Jonathan. Leslie is asking if you can show the footprint of the basin again and talk about the area where the basin will be.
Sure. See here on the screen now, we are in the Arbor Oaks neighborhood, just west of Vogel Road and on the north side of West Little York. Our basin is separated east and west by, or will be separated east and west by Vogel Creek, and then also separated north and south by this existing natural gas pipeline that runs east to west, and that will remain in place. And so the basin would ultimately be comprised of these 4 compartments that you see here. And so this area is sort of nestled in on the north side of West Little York Road and east of Antoine, south of Victory, right along Vogel Creek.
Thank you, Jonathan. Looks like we're going to be wrapping up here shortly, a few more minutes to get your questions in. I do know one of the things folks always ask, again, is the timeline. And even though we've gone over it a couple of times, maybe we can have that as one of the last mentions. If you could go over sort of the timeline and next steps, Jonathan.
Sure. So very shortly, in these next couple of months, we will complete our preliminary engineering report and then move into the final design stage for the rest of this year. And then we expect construction to begin right about this time next year in 2022. And we have to complete construction and habitat restoration by October 2024 due to our deadline with this NRCS grant.
Thank you, Jonathan. I want to reiterate to folks again that for those properties we do not own, we are working directly with those property owners whose property is needed. And also a lot of good questions tonight, but for those asking specific questions about property acquisition, we'll reach out to you after the meeting and address your specific property concerns. Gave you a good contact earlier, so I'll repeat that for those who might have missed it. If you do have property acquisition questions, we will reach out to you, but you can feel free to call Don Ward with the Harris County Real Property Division, an acquisition agent there. Graciously given us the number to give to you, 239-272-2636, and that's Don Ward, property acquisition agent, 239-272-2636. So feel free to reach out to him as well, and feel free to continue to send us your comments and comment on this project through the close of, let's see, comment period. We'll make sure that we get back to you and get those questions answered. Do want to thank you all so much for joining us tonight. A lot of great questions, a lot of good answers. Jonathan St. Romain and Melissa Meyer, as well as Mr. Liebert, who was on hand to be able to take some questions if needed. Thanks so much for joining us, everyone. We always like to issue one final reminder to purchase flood insurance as well, because we know in Harris County that flood season is year-round. Thanks so much for joining us, everyone. Have a great evening. Remember, all these materials will be available to you on the Harris County Flood Control District website, and you'll also be able to rewatch this Q&A session on our YouTube channel. Stay safe and have a great evening.